Hey there. This is take 2. So we'll see. There it is. Good. All right. So part 3 of my book. I'm going to be reading it. And let's just get started. So this chapter is called Funeral. Friends, people of Glovedom, Rebecca was one who it pains me to speak of as dead. She was 19 when she came to us, a young woman with an extraordinary talent. She made Glovedom into the proud town it is today. Because of her, our bridges stand, our roads are level, and our lanterns glow through the night. She was our foundation. Now, she is gone. Without the foundation, the mortar crumbles and breaks. Our lorddom will... Lord Glove paused, opened his mouth to continue, then frowned, and began his speech anew. She was not from our lands. She came from far away, from a kingdom to the north, bordering the sea. Those whose memories stretch back as far as mine might well remember her longing to return. Lord Glove smiled. She was always going on about it, never stopped insisting how much better fish born in brine tasted. The smile left his face. Of course, in later years, she gave up on her dream. She even gave up on the surface world. She never saw the sea again, not once in all her years. For that, and 70 further offenses, I am steeped in regret. She wished to be buried beneath the waves, and this we cannot do. We have not the funds to return her body to the ocean, nor the time to spare in the journey. I would attempt to honor her nonetheless, to give her a funeral of highest honor. Her people followed the old ways, the rituals of death and true name. I will speak the ancient rites, in addition to our own, as Rezel drives the nails. Lord Glove beckoned, and his 6 guardsmen took up the board bearing Rebecca's uncovered body. He stared at her face as it drew level with his own, old, bitter, sad, so different from the young girl he had once known. Just get into my singing voice there. Yeah. La la la. She wore the clothes she had died in, as was custom. A shapeless white tunic stained with mud, grey trousers in a similar state. Lord Glove had given her a dozen fine suits, and another half-dozen beautiful dresses, but she was attending her funeral in rags. Lord Glove turned abruptly, taking several hasty steps before falling into a dignified march. His guards lurched into motion a moment later, matching Lord Glove step for step. In turn, the 7 men were followed by the citizens of Glovedom. Lord Glove led the procession north, past the wooden huts of the village, past the outpost and border, turning west before the bridge. They approached a grove of empress trees, blossoms not yet in bloom, branches still wet from the storm. The tall, gray-brown trees stood in solemn silence as the party passed beneath their boughs. Lord Glove stopped 7 paces from a young empress tree, bark smooth and free of whorls. His guard drew up beside him with their burden. The citizens of Glovedom arrived. All bowed their heads in reverence. The leaves of the empress trees swayed from a sudden breeze, filling the air with rustling sighs. A man clothed in light pink robes emerged from deeper in the grove. His thin lips were pale, nearly white, his cheekbones high, and his face austere. He would have been imposing if not for his gently balding head and sparkling green eyes. This empress was planted halfway through last year. This spring will see it grow to mighty heights, he said softly. Rebecca would be honored. Rebecca would be honored. His words lessened the pain in Lord Glove's heart. The words were meant to be kind, but they were kind because they were true. He was the grove keeper. He was the grove keeper Rezel, and he did not lie. Rezel spread his muscled arms wide and walked to the men bearing Rebecca. The grove will take your burden, today and always. The 6 guardsmen lowered the body to the ground and stepped aside. Rezel took Rebecca in his embrace and bore her to the base of the Empress. He lifted her into a standing position and placed her back against the tree. Then he took 5 wooden stakes and 3 lengths of rope from the tan belt about his waist. He placed Rebecca's arms behind her to encircle the tree and clasped each of her hands about the wrist of the opposite arm. This completed, he wrapped the first length of rope around her arms, binding them together. Rezel lifted her once more and drove the first stake into the tree between her legs, resting her body atop it. Then he placed the stakes above and below each elbow and used the remaining 2 ropes to secure each elbow to their stakes. Rezel stepped back from the tree and studied Rebecca's bound body. Her chin was bowed low to her chest, and she sagged slightly in the ropes, otherwise remaining upright. Rezel nodded to Lord Glove, then turned to the citizenry. Rebecca is now bound to the tree. She has become its burden. The stake supporting her is Shauna, who lends her strong arms for the 43rd time. She will need much of your strength, Shauna, but she is worth it 700 times. The stake beneath her left arm is Will, who redeems himself for the 2nd time, and shall know rest after he opens his heart 5 times more. Let Rebecca know all may be redeemed, even yourself, Will. The stake beneath her right arm is Lily, who will act as a guardian for the 8th time. Keep her healthy and strong, Lily. Above her right arm is Seraphmon, who is ready to learn after 400 deaths. Guide Rebecca for us, Seraphmon. Above the left, altar by the water. At this, a few in the crowd gasped, and several girls were raised onto shoulders to view the stake. Who cries once more after the age of death, and will, for the 823,543rd time, lend his honor. Give Rebecca pain, that she might find peace. Whispers erupted among the crowd, but cut off immediately as Lord Glove and his guard knelt. Rezel held the silence for 7 heartbeats before speaking. I will now place the 7 wooden nails taken from 7 unburdened empress trees. Lord Glove rose, still facing Rebecca. His tone was quiet, rushed, and rough, yet all gathered heard him in the absolute silence. Rebecca, your true name, revealed to me, is Averse. Thus said, place a nail through the left forearm. Rezel took up hammer and mallet and drove a wooden nail through Averse's left arm and into the tree. Averse, you worked all your life. Now is the time to put up your tools and rest. Thus spoken, place a nail through the right forearm. Rezel moved around the tree in a counterclockwise motion, facing forward the entire time, then turned to her right arm. He took another pinkish-gray nail and hammered it through. Averse, your will has been worn down. Draw now from this tree, for your burden is its own. Lord Glove bit back a sob. Thus uttered, place a nail through the left leg. Rezel drew one of the 2 thickest nails and circled back clockwise to face her leg. He rested it against Averse's thigh. Then he began to chant, quick and high. He gulped in air, and the breathing became part of the prayer. The tendons on his neck popped. His arms bulged. The mallet in his right hand began to tremble. Abruptly, Rezel cut off the chant and swung his hammer. A loud crack resounded in the glade as the nail split Averse's femur in 2, and was followed by a thud as it drove into the tree. Averse, your legs have carried you for a lifetime and can carry you no further. Let this tree do the walking for you. Thus asked, place a nail through the right leg. Rezel moved to his left and swapped the mallet to his other hand. Then he chanted a new prayer, this one slower than the first, and deeper. This time his shoulders eased, his arm hung loose, as though Rezel were sleeping. When the prayer ended, however, he struck with more force than the first time. The crack startled a brilliance of White Watchers from the trees. As one, they let out a wavering cry. It resonated through the glade and filled all who heard it with sorrow. 7 minutes later, at the sun's zenith, the birds returned. Instead of returning to their perches amongst the grove, they all settled in Aversa's tree. Each bird was a tiny white flower among its branches. So many were their number, it appeared as if the tree was in bloom. Lord Glove continued, Averse, your pain is too much to hold. No one can hold pain. None save this tree, which will take your pain now. Thus intoned, place a nail through the hidden light. Rezel straightened and lay 3 fingers below Aversa's collarbone on the left side of her body. Rezel took one of the nails with thin shaft and wide head, and gently pressed it between her ribs to find the tree. Averse, you are made from lightning and thunder. This tree pays the cost of being burdened, and so receives your power to sustain it. Thus declared, place a nail through the lucid darkness. Rezel shifted to Aversa's right side, and again placed 3 fingers below her collarbone, this time with his right hand. Then, with his left, he pushed the nail between her ribs, fixing her torso to the tree. Averse, this is your true name. It is a sad name. You lived your life in reclusion, only venturing out when duty called. You never loved, never asked for anybody. Upon death, you lose your mask, and so too does your name. The beginning ends now. Lord Glove paused for a moment and swallowed, the start of tears evident in his eyes. It's time for us to bid you your last, Averse. It is time for the world to greet the inner melody of your true self. He knelt. Welcome, Verse. Rezel took the final nail and drove it through the center of Aversa's abdomen. Then he stood and placed his lips against her forehead. When he backed away, Verse's eyes were closed. That part's important because her name changed. The crowd waited for the first cries of the White Watchers. A slight breeze stirred dead petals to dance one last time through the legs of the gathered. The first sonorous calls came an hour later. The people left in ones and twos until only Lord Glove and his guard stood with Rezel. At the second cry of the White Watchers, his guard left. Much later, a knave child was sent to the river to fetch water for his parents. While filling his bucket, he saw Lord Glove on his knees, framed by the setting sun. Rezel's hand rested upon the ruler's shoulder, while the 7th cry of the White Watchers echoed about the glade. Then the sun slipped below the horizon, and the girl lost sight of them. Next chapter. The king looks out a window. King Ernest stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring at the monotonous view offered by his window. Father, you have been staring at the drapes since dawn. Can I not draw them for you? Tala was sitting at the private dining table she and Ernest shared. It was currently dominated by a large freehand map of the kingdom and surrounding domains. Ernest smiled a sad smile he knew his daughter could not see. If the curtains were drawn, I would see the gentle green of trees budding. I would see Martin, the huntsmaster, walking his horses. I'd see my people smiling and waving at me as they walked past the window on their way to the well. My kingdom is a place of such beauty, I fear to look at it. I can't stand to be reminded of all I will lose. You will lose nothing, Tala said firmly. King Otto's diplomat was offering an alliance. He spoke of nothing else. No threats, no bribes, no blackmail. Yet Gaunter continues to grow. Is it his armies you fear? Look, Tala pointed at her map. I've marked the last known locations of Otto's armies in green. What do you see? Ernest looked at his daughter's sketch. she had placed little colored discs of wood all over its surface. Most of them were green. I see you've had a very busy morning. You've also been reading my private reports. Tala rolled her eyes. I don't spend all day on lessons, Father. I have my own spies. Now please, your thoughts? Tala had her own spies and was making maps before breakfast. He'd have to have a word with her teacher. Richter wasn't giving her enough to do. He laughed gently through his nose and kissed the top of Tala's head. The girl was obsessed with politics. He studied her discs through the fringe of her hair. We are outnumbered. If Dirkdom sides with Otto, we will be surrounded. Fortunately, King Dirk was amiable to my suggestion of a secret truce. He rubbed the top of Tala's head. A truce even your spies won't have known about. She smiled sweetly up at him. They didn't need to. You just told me. She became serious again. What you are supposed to see is the arrangement of his armies. His troops are scattered, and no two armies are equal to our one. They couldn't attack us if they wanted to. Ernos pointed to a chip right by the border. What about this one here? They could be on us in days. Tala held it up to his eyes. If you open the curtains, maybe you could tell it's gray, not green. This means the reports are inconclusive. Otto is said to have elite shock troops there, but I couldn't confirm the rumors. A horrible suspicion entered Ernost's mind. Who rules the lorddom? Lord Glove. Ernos paled, causing his daughter to hesitate. Do you know of him? King Ernos went back to the curtain. Aye. He is a hero of old. Served when I was a girl. Known as a general without rivals since the time of Stalwart. He's also rumored to be Otto's personal assassin. Tala moved to her father's side. She put an arm around him and pulled him close. He'd be an old man by now. An old man without an army. You need not fear for your kingdom. Draw the curtain. I would see it once more, as it is now. Why do you still fear? Ernos pulled the cord at the window, and light flooded in. He let out a sigh and began to smile, even as a tear traced its way down his cheek. After I am dead, you must cede to Otto. If you resist, his assassins will return. I'm not afraid. Promise me you'll surrender. Otherwise, the next to take the crown will die. And the next. The pattern will repeat itself until Ganter is content our monarch will lead the Dom to ruin. I'll promise to surrender if you promise to have hope about our future. There's no cause for despair. Ernos kicked her. That is not what it says. Ernos kissed her cheek. I promise to have hope. I hope they will accept my refusal. I hope my beloved daughter may inherit a Dom as wondrous as the one I have had the honor to rule. I promise not to give in to despair, nor into anger. Ernos Dom is the land of a free people, not conquerors. For you, I will never give up hope. For this land, I will never stand down. This I promise. Then I promise as well, said Tala, and hugged him. Next chapter. Matthew asks his question for the first time. Matthew's study of Gaunter had lit the coals of curiosity beneath his feet, and they were starting to burn. The pain was too great to continue without answers. He set down his quill and looked expectantly at his master. Adel? In turn, Adel continued to read. Ganthiel is a young Dom, less than 8 years past its creation, and I fear it will be destroyed. I declared 343, year 0, the bargain. A week has passed. How things change. The peace cannot be kept. The Caneser always have frightened me. A Dom divided is a Dom soon to be conquered. My foes have never understood me. The world is so much larger than our petty feuds. I was right from the beginning. I have betrayed my people. Yes, King Stalwart, very sad. Get to the point. There's only a few lines left to this scrap. His master gestured for the dead king's benefit. A religious cult of artisans now opposes me. A single organization should not have their power. My Konar spoke against their destruction, claiming appeasement would be enough. Appeasement is the game of fools. A king cannot afford such risk. I fear for Ganthiel. The mightiest warriors cannot slay the earth. I cannot say I remember Ganthiel among their doms, nor Canisar being the name of an order. I thought it was a job description. Adel, please, it will be brief. It's about Gaunter, Ganthiel's successor. You won't even have to search the archives. Adel thumbed through the scraps of parchment before him. He went through them again, then scowled. He put down the stack and leaned back in his chair, finally looking at Matthew. The next page is missing. It's on such a cliffhanger, I'd swear they did it on purpose. Ha! We'll show them. The text must be restored. Mind like a steel sieve. I know just the place. Where's my coat? It's raining, figures. I'll need my hat as well. Fetch it for me, Matthew. And my cane. It's a full stride at least to the burned city. Might need a carriage. Don't want to make more than one trip. City's haunted, they say. Might need an exorcist. Matthew, check the histories for exorcisms and grab some candles and bells. I think you need those. Bells and candles and food. Not for the exorcism, mind. You'll be wasting good cheese on a ghost. Ghosts don't eat cheese. They're evil. They eat eggs. Yes, eggs, like a snake. Snakes eat eggs, did you know? Evil creatures. Might be some in the city. Adel drew in a breath. Matthew spoke as fast as he could, trying to take advantage of the moment. Adel, can we talk about... Too cold for snakes. I agree. What were you thinking, saying there'd be snakes? Now you've got the horses frightened, I've no doubt. Good luck riding into the city. As the great philosopher Stilla once said, Hello, it's dark and I can't find my keys. Can you set me in? Hello? Adel paused, presumably to ponder the quotation. Naturally, it cannot be taken literally. It's a metaphor for describing the relationship between darkness and personal safety. A play on the old aphorism. It's always darkest when there's no light, if you will. Of course, starting with a question, or perhaps a greeting, would suggest quite a different interpretation. It may be that it pertains to the vernal hero of legends, Swan. He too once said, hello, on a fine spring morn, or so it is said. My point is, why are you still sitting there? Did I not ask for my coat? Matthew sighed, wiped his quill clean, and packed it alongside his ink powders. Then he carefully took up the small wooden discs containing his activated ink and carried it with him towards the damp room. Archivists had two fears. The first was fire. When you work with, are surrounded by, and occasionally covered in paper, you begin to notice how quickly you could redefine the term room temperature. Consequently, archives don't have a fireplace, and were instead heated by hooded lamps they used for light. This ensured the archivists were always cold and nursing stubbed toes. The second fear of an archivist was water. Mold didn't destroy ancient scrolls quite as fast as fire, but it did so just as effectively. Furthermore, given the perpetual darkness of an archive, the slightest warp in a floorboard or twist of a door frame was a guarantor of injury and might even cause an archivist to drop their lantern, thus leading back to fear number one. To that end, archives are equipped with a damp room, a place to hang wet clothing, to store lantern wicks, and to activate ink. Or so Adel claimed. Matthew hadn't been to any other archives, but he couldn't imagine anyone willing to work in them if they were all like Adel's. Unless all archivists were like Adel. Matthew didn't know what was wrong with him. The old man was always cheerful when in the archives, and grumpy anywhere else. Matthew shouldered open the swollen cedar door to the damp room. He skipped past the short stone stair, neatly avoiding a tumble. He'd made it twice this week. That made it twice this week he'd pulled off the feet. Adel said the bruises had faded eventually. As he groped about in the dark for the cupboard where he stored his writing utensils, Matthew was startled by a thump from the outside door. Matthew! Is that you? It's raining. I'm getting the chills out here. I'm missing a shoe, and my foot has lost all color. I'm a bit worried. Is that normal? Wait, no, it's coming back. Was it always that blue? I hope I don't lose my toes. You can do a lot with a good set of toes, much more useful than your fingers. Can't walk on your fingers. I should have eaten my glove. Matthew gritted his teeth. Adel says you're not allowed in. He doesn't want someone dripping water all over the wooden floors and tempting mold. Some of these scrolls are ancient, and if they get the least bit wet, musty, we'll lose a millennium worth of knowledge. If I die of cold, you'll lose a millennium worth of knowledge. You babes swallow the impertinence of an ill-spent youth. I have consorted with kings, I'll have you know. I've queried with queens, discoursed with demons, wrestled with wizards, whispered with witches, tangled with... Matthew began looking for his and Adel's coats. Masticated with martyrs, reconvened with writers, napped with Nagerer. German's not my strong suit, obviously. Nagerer. We're going on a trip to the burned city. Will you be coming with us? Lyophilized with lawyers. Yes, of course I'm coming. A trip? Wouldn't miss it for all the dried herring in the world. Though out here, it would soak through, and then it'd be quite soggy sort of herring. I think my coat's inside, if you could just let me in. Matthew ignored the door and walked back to his master. He found him hard at work, attempting to shove 3 enormous volumes, each thicker than the span of Matthew's hand, into a tiny carrying case. He looked up as Matthew entered the room. Ah, there you are, my boy. Have you seen to the horse yet? I can't be doing all the work. We've got a long journey ahead of us, you know. Matthew couldn't help but agree with him. Interlude number 1. Glove. Ebony throne on onyx dais. Stone tomb flooded with shadows. Iron hides among silver. One hand wooden, one hand dark. It's Lord Glove. You know the title I have earned. Laughter. Beckoning. Lord Glove. Do you miss her? I've heard tales of you moping about at her funeral. One step. Kneel. I do not. I grieve for the life she never had. My heart is broken. Creaking weights. Clattering rings. You are stronger than I will ever be. Did you get my letter? Did you get my letter? Red seal. Thick paper. Crack. One name. Heavy ink. Fortune fare you, my king. 10 steps to the hall. 12 steps to the door. The stone door opens. Light sweeps across the room. The door shuts. Darkness reigns. And I think I will wrap it up there for now. I would have liked to go a little bit longer, but unfortunately, I actually messed up the setup of this a little bit and spent 15 minutes of talking just trying to get this thing working. So we will continue with Grady and Trent stop an invasion next time. Thank you for watching. And if you're interested in getting this book, reading it faster, reading it yourself, you can find a link to it in the description down below. I did it myself. That down below thing, I swore I wouldn't do it at one point because it's so obvious that the description's below, but there you have it. Becomes reflex somehow. All right. Take care. Hope you have a good one. And I will see you next time. Oh, did we just get a person on? Just as I was leaving? Well, speak quickly if you want to be seen. I'll give you 15 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, they're gone. All right. See ya. Bye.